Okay, we're rolling.
This is an interview at Division Military Naval Affairs Headquarters, Latham, New York, 30th of December 2003. It's approximately 1 p.m. The interviewers are Michael Russert and Wayne Clark. Could you give me your full name, date of birth, and place of birth, please?
Forrest S. Ritgers, Jr. I was born August 27th, 1931, Cedar Rapids, Iowa.
Okay. What was your educational background prior to entering service?
College, high school, what do you want to say?
Well, how far did you go before you...
Well, I graduated in the Citadel
Okay.
in
Oh,
Charleston,
okay.
South Carolina, and that's a four-year military
Yes.
college.
Mhm.
And I got my regular Army commission through that program.
Mhm. How did you like your time at the Citadel?
I really liked it. I was one of the few people, surprisingly, one of the few people who were there to go into the Army. I thought that anybody that went to a military school, military college, their objective was to have a military career, and I found that I was one of the few there with that idea.
Mm-hmm.
It's an old tradition in the South to send your boys to military school. And so one of my roommates was going to be a doctor. The others were going to go into business. Had no intention of going into the service. But I enjoyed it there very much. I like the discipline. I like the structure of it, the organization of it. Kind of thing that suited me just right. You know, they locked you in every night, and you had to study. You had to do a lot of things. Well, it was a military environment,
Mhm.
and I really enjoyed that. My dad had been in the Army, or was in the Army then, and so the last few years I had grown up in that environment, so that suited me.
How were you treated as a Northerner
Not well,
in there?
not well.
Mhm.
A lot of it was ribbing, and a lot of it was harassment, but it's a Southern school, no question
Yes.
about it.
Okay. After you graduated, then you were commissioned
Yeah, I was commissioned in they commissioned everybody in the Army Reserve, and but I had qualified for regular Army commission, and so 6 days later I was sworn into the regular Army by my dad up here at Syracuse University.
Now, what was his rank?
He was a full colonel, and he was a professor of military science at Syracuse University, and so I came home and had him do the honors, and I got married the next day.
Huh? All right. Did you have a military wedding?
I did not. I did not, no.
Okay. So, could you tell us about your time in the service? You went in, you graduated in 63 then, or 53, I'm sorry.
53.
And where was your first assignment?
Well, my first tour of duty was the basic infantry officer course at Fort Benning. At that time, I think it was a 10 or 11-week course. Of course, I was already married, been married for a week when we took off for that. And at the completion of that, I was assigned at Fort Dix, New Jersey. And we were there probably about 2 years. I commanded a basic training company most of that time. Went overseas to Germany.
Now, was your wife able to travel with you most of these?
Yes. Yes, I guess I was over there about a month before she was able to come over. There was a waiting list for housing. And so I was assigned to the 9th Infantry Division, to a infantry regiment and a heavy mortar company. I was the recon officer, so like the executive officer of the heavy mortar company. And we were there in Fürth, Nuremberg, Germany for, I guess 2 years, 2.5 years, and 9th Division gyroscope back to the United States, and I hadn't been over there long enough to go with them, so I stayed in place. New division came in, 8th Division. I served with them in a heavy weapons company as again as recon officer. And I had a few months as a regimental assistant adjutant. And so we had a typical peacetime duty in the occupation. A lot of time spent in the field, Hohenfels, Grafenwehr, on maneuvers. At that time, there was always a great deal of stress over whether the Russians were going to invade Western Europe.
Mm-hmm.
So we had alerts every month. We'd go out to our alert position, and which was our wartime position that we would have gone to if the balloon had gone up. So most of the training at that time was very field-oriented and very focused, and a high sense of responsibility. Even though we were a draft army at that time, everybody was very much primed towards what would happen if the Russians did something. Cold War was really hot. Berlin airlift went on. And so we spent a lot of time in the field. Good training, good soldiers, good officers. Those were good units. And I served with the 9th Division, the 8th Division, the 10th Division. I gyroscoped home with the 10th Infantry Division. One little vignette about that. Turned out I was the senior officer in the 10th Division who had a wife who was 7 months pregnant. And that meant that I was responsible for I was put in charge, I was a first lieutenant. I was put in charge of all of the women who were 7 months or more pregnant for the return trip to the United States, because they got to fly home, and the troops went back on a ship. And so they gave me this convoy of buses, and we traveled around the 10th Division area of southern Germany to collect up the people who all qualified for this trip home, and got to Rhine-Main Air Base, and we had a whole plane full of these gals and their kids. And then I turned them over to the Red Cross when I got back to when we flew into Kennedy Airport. But that was quite an experience. One of the first times I'd been in charge of such a disparate group of. As we're bouncing along in this bus, every 10 minutes a different one would raise her hand and have to make a pit stop. And there were no nice restaurants to stop at, so it was a matter of stopping along the side of the road, finding the nearest haystack or barn or some place that they could get out. We came back from Germany in 1958, and I was assigned again to Fort Benning to the Infantry Officer Advanced Course. And that was a 9-month course. And at the completion of that, I went to airborne school, and then on to ROTC duty at Dickinson College in Carlisle, Pennsylvania. And we were there 3 years. One of the interesting things about that assignment, small college, liberal arts college, very much anti-military. Faculty was anti-military, but the president of the college was very pro-military. He'd served in World War I, and he was gung-ho for the ROTC, but the faculty as a whole wished that we were somewhere else. And we were stuck off in the basement of the oldest building on the campus, really a dungeon. And it was a wonderful experience because the students there, of course there were just male students in the ROTC in those days, they really seemed to hunger for somebody to talk to, somebody to provide them some counsel and advice. They their faculty advisors weren't as available as they should have been. And they just seemed to hang around our area down there, and a lot of fine young men later on went into the service. Some of them, I recall one got to be a major general right up here at Fort Drum. David Meade came out of that program those days, and it was a very unmilitary college. But the ROTC program there was strong. We had a lot of, there were just 4 officers on the staff, and I guess we had 5 or 6 NCOs, but all of the NCOs had been officers during World War II and Korea, but they didn't have enough time in as an officer to retire, and when the Army was downsized, they got busted back to, well, their choice was to get out without a retirement, or to, in effect, re-enlist, take an enlisted grade that had been determined for them, and continue to serve until they had at least 20 years of service. And some of them had been busted back to like staff sergeant. Most of them were master sergeants, but every NCO we had there was an ex-officer. And so we had a lot of experience, a lot of talent there on the staff. And that was a very good, and I thought I'd been sent to the end of the world to go to ROTC duty, but it was really a very broadening assignment. From there, I was assigned to the Army Command General Staff College at Fort Leavenworth, and that was another year of schooling, and that would have been in 1962-63. And from there to Vietnam. The Vietnam conflict was getting pretty hot about that time, and a lot of people were being sent over. So we went to a special course at Fort Bragg to prepare us for, culturally and language-wise and so on, for going to that type of assignment. And so I went then to South Vietnam in 1963 and was a training advisor at a little Vietnamese training center, Civil Guard Self-Defense Corps training center, kind of like their militia, National Guard. It wasn't even National Guard, it was less, it was at the militia level.
Is that like a civilian irregular defense group or something like that?
That's right, that's right. They wore uniforms, but they were very poorly paid, and they were kind of the dregs of the military there. And they were responsible for protecting the hamlets, the villages. So this was not the regular Army. And so I was responsible on this team. We had a team of about 10 advisors. I was a major by that time. So I think we had 2 majors and a captain and a lieutenant and a few sergeants, radio operator, medic. And we lived in a little tent compound on this base, and we provided the training for them in not only the tactical training, but the administrative training and support. And I recall during that tour, President Kennedy was assassinated. There also, the president of South Vietnam was assassinated. There was an overthrow. So,
What was your reaction, or the reaction to the others, about Kennedy's assassination?
well, we were told, when the word got to us, we were told to really exercise great care not to leave the base, to be prepared to protect ourselves. Nobody knew what the reaction was going to be on the part of the Vietnamese to this, because he'd been very supportive of the war, very supportive of the support there. And I think the Vietnamese were very apprehensive about what might happen. And we were just getting little driblets of news, but it was the tension was pretty high on both of these assassinations. The Vietnamese soldiers that were part of of that training were conscripts. They certainly did not have the level of will, determination that the regular Army soldiers had then.
Now, what
But
kind
there
of
were-
weapons did they have? Did they have like World War II weapons or?
Well, I'm trying to remember. I think they were using U.S. weapons, what had been provided by the U.S., but I'm trying to remember what we'd provided them. Whether they had, I'm not sure we had M16 rifles there at that time. They may have been using M1
I
rifles.
think they may have had the M1 Garand and also the M1 carbine, I think they were using.
Okay.
And some of them, I think,
Because I know I carried a carbine.
Some of them were issued the grease gun too, I believe.
Right. But that was before we had M16s. But they were poorly equipped, poorly outfitted, poorly motivated, except for the fact that they were going to be protecting their own villages. The great enigma there was that you didn't know friend from foe. You drive off the little compound to go to the training center, and there'd be people along the road wearing black pajamas, and you didn't know whether it was a friendly person or somebody that wasn't friendly. I often, to get my hair cut, I had to go into the village, right off the base at Phuket, to get my hair cut. I always wondered when the Vietnamese give you a haircut, they not only cut your hair, but then they shave inside your ears and your nose and they're down the back of your neck. You really got this razor going, and I always wondered what the loyalty was of the person wielding this thing. I was never too comfortable with that. I was there on that base for 5 months, and got a promotion to be a regimental senior advisor to a Vietnamese regiment, and I was assigned to the 47th Separate Infantry Regiment, which was located probably 30 or 40 miles away from there. And there were probably 4 or 5 separate regiments in the Vietnamese Army. And so this separate regiment was assigned to 2nd Corps, and in turn to the 23rd Arvin Division was attached. And my great objective there was to try to get them to go to the field. The regimental commander and the province chief were one and the same. That meant that the regimental commander was very politically focused, and the 47th Infantry Regiment sat in this village inside their compound and did not get out of it very often. And my instructions were to get them out into the field, get them out conducting ambushes, get them doing something. And that was very difficult. And it wasn't until they broke this command structure and split it so that there was a regimental commander that was not also involved with the politics, that we were able to accomplish that. And we actually managed to get the whole regiment out into the field on a couple of large operations.
How reliable were they once they were out there?
I was not impressed. I wasn't impressed with the aggressiveness. I'm not talking about the soldiers. I'm talking about the leadership. Soldiers will do what the leaders lead them to do and direct them to do. And when you have weak leadership, then you're going to have weak soldiering. And I found that the leadership in the regiment, from the regimental commander on down through the junior officers, was very timid and unwilling to take chances, unwilling to make contact, unwilling to fight. And now, if they captured somebody, it was a totally different matter. Then it was a problem keeping them from killing the prisoner. Their idea of the proper way to handle a prisoner was to string them up so that the villagers could see what happens to you when you are on the wrong side. Never would occur to them to interrogate the prisoner, to try to get information, develop intelligence. So torturing of prisoners was commonplace. And of course, we disapproved of all of that, but we didn't have the, we were advisors. We didn't have the authority to stop it. You could report it, and we reported it, but it didn't do a lot of good. At the same time, despite the fact that I didn't see a great will to fight and a will to win, I was personally satisfied that we were doing the right thing there. I felt that the advisory effort in South Vietnam was what I was trained to do, and I think it was effective. It was as effective as we could make it, but it was all part of the overall strategy of if we don't fight them here, we're going to be fighting them somewhere else. And it was important to draw the line and to try to stem the tide there in South Vietnam and turn that battle around. And I've read a lot of stuff since about people who said that that's what we were supposed to be doing at the time, but have since changed their tune on that. But I'm not one of those. I think that it was a just war. But when I left, I can't say that we had accomplished a whole lot. I mean, it was we were not better off at the end of the year that I was there than we were when I arrived. And there was no sign that it was going to be over anytime soon. Following that assignment, I came back to the United States, went back to Fort Benning, and was assigned to Combat Developments Command, the Infantry Agency. Combat Developments Command was located at Fort Belvoir, and then they had an office at each of the branch posts. So there was an Artillery Combat Developments Command, and there was Infantry and Field Arts, Air Defense, Engineer, and so on. And our job was to develop tactics and equipment for the future. At that time, I was one of the few people in the agency at that time who had been to Vietnam, so I got involved in development, writing doctrine for infantry, for the field manuals and the equipment. I remember at that time what became the M16 rifle was being developed there at Fort Benning. My particular job there ultimately was with a study called the Infantry Rifle Unit Study, IRIS 70, for the year 1970. And we had a small team of people whose job it was to develop the organization, equipment, and doctrine of the Infantry Rifle Squad. And I believe that study is still going on. I don't think that they ever came to a resolution on it, but it was a lot of fun, and I got to meet a lot of good people through that, and that, again, was a formative piece of my own training to be associated with that over a couple of years. After being there a couple of years, I guess I was assigned to Germany again, to headquarters U.S. Army Europe, and I was assigned to the officer assignment branch out in the Despr. And our job there was to do the officer assignments on officers that were coming into Europe. So we were responsible for, career management and assignments throughout Europe. And I was specifically involved as I was the assignment officer for colonels. I went from there to Augsburg, to the 24th Infantry Division forward. That was a brigade, a reinforced brigade of the 24th Infantry Division that was assigned there. It's part of a reforger organization. The rest of the division was located at Fort Riley, Kansas. So 1/3 of it was based there in Europe. And I served as deputy commander of that organization for only about 6 months, and then I volunteered to go back to Vietnam. It was clear to me that by that time we had U.S. units in Vietnam, and I was by then a lieutenant colonel. And what do infantry lieutenant colonels supposed to do? Command infantry battalions, and if they're, you're trained to do this in war, and that's where the war was in Vietnam. It wasn't in Germany. So I wanted to do that, and was assigned to the 25th Division in Japan. I'm sorry, in Vietnam. So we came back to the United States and had about 30 days to leave, and got a house for the family to live in near Syracuse, where my wife's home was, and went back to Vietnam. I was assigned to the 25th Division first as executive officer of the 3rd Brigade at Dao Tiang. My job there was the base camp defense. That was a very large base. It had the 3rd Brigade of the division there, plus a lot of corps level units. And it was right next to the Michelin rubber plantation. The first night I was there, I'd no sooner gotten in my bunk than they started shelling the airfield, and our quarters were right next to the airfield, and everybody hits the deck and goes under the bed. I found that there was a large Conex container, these big shipping containers down on the first floor of this building that somebody had brought in there and sandbagged, and there were a couple of the officers that just every night slept in this Conex container. Couldn't believe it. This was so different from my first tour over there, because we hadn't been subjected to any of that kind of stuff. And every night...
As you're doing this, could you tell us the differences between your first and second tour, what you noticed?
Well, the main thing I noticed, of course, was I was working with U.S. units. I had very little contact with the Vietnamese on the second tour.
So there's been a change then from reliance on indigenous units to American units.
Well, when we were there as advisors,
yes, right.
Our job was to assist the Vietnamese in fighting their war.
Now, were you, if there was an engagement the first tour, were you allowed to get involved?
Yes, but we were really, our job was to help them, advise them.
Right.
We were not there to be the fighters. We were there to be the helpers. But part of helping is demonstration and is modeling. And I know that we may have crossed the line a few times on that, but basically we were there to help, and we carried weapons. We fired our weapons when we had to, but basically we're there to help them. Second tour, even though the advisory effort was still going on, and there were advisors all over the country, I wasn't around that much. The infantry battalions that I ended up commanding only infrequently worked side by side with the Vietnamese units. We had interpreters that would be assigned to us, scouts that would be assigned to us, but I saw very little of the Vietnamese military structure when I was a battalion commander. After being at Dao Tiang for 3 months, I was assigned as a battalion commander, 2nd 27th Infantry. The typical way to get assigned as a battalion commander was if the battalion commander in the division got killed or wounded, because it looked to me like a few of them made it to the end of the normal 6-month tour. And just during the time that I was exec of the brigade, I watched battalion commanders come and go, and with some rapidity. The officer I replaced, Vince Odie, had his foot blown off by a landmine, and the word came down just to grab the first helicopter you can get and report out to Fire Support Base Jackson. You're in command. He'd already been evacuated. And the war for our battalion then was a series of skirmishes like that. Companies would be put out and establish very small patrol bases, either a full company or a half a company, and they were then to send out ambush patrols. And the area was heavily booby-trapped, and virtually every one of these patrols that would go out would take casualties of some sort from the booby traps. And these booby traps were being set by villagers, as best we could determine. We were not facing a uniformed enemy in the area that we were in. We were northwest of Cu Chi, and a platoon would go down a rice paddy dike, and bang, somebody had put a wire across the thing and triggered a grenade. And we had a lot of limbs lost through this. And one of the impacts of this was that it caused units to be very reluctant to want to go out on patrol. We had a number of instances where patrols would go out at night, and they were supposed to report their locations every 30 minutes or hour or something like that. They'd be reporting these locations, and you'd find out later that they'd gone out and holed up in one place and hadn't moved. But were reporting that they had gone around, and this was a direct result of our inability to overcome this booby trap environment. And you had very inexperienced leadership at the platoon level. Your lieutenants were second lieutenants for the most part. Had gone through basic officer course in the United States, shipped to Vietnam, bang, they're into a platoon. The sergeants were what we refer to as shake and bakes. These were sergeants that had gone through an NCO, very brief NCO school in the United States, and made sergeant. They were the squad leaders and often the platoon sergeants. And,
how do you, I guess this relates to it, how do you feel about the tour of duty, 6 months for an officer, a year for an enlisted man?
Well, it was 6 months. That's not quite correct.
Well, okay.
It was 6 months command time.
Okay, command time and...
And for an enlisted man, the idea was that generally he would serve X amount of time on the line, and then they try to get him in the rear they try to split the tour so that the full year was not spent
Right.
under direct fire. How do I feel about that? Well, it meant that your turnover of leadership is very, very fast. And in peacetime, the standard command tour is 18 months to 2 years. And my experience with that was that even by the time that 18 months had come along, you'd really just gotten to the point where you felt like you were in control of things and knew everybody. This constant turnover of people does not make for a strong, disciplined organization where people can rely on each other. Because it just seems like people are new all the time. And it's a tough way to get experience under fire. So I'm not for it. I'm a stronger proponent of unit replacements than I am individual replacements. You take an entire unit and you put it in, and you keep them there together. Now, obviously with casualties, there are things that are going to cause individuals to have to come into a unit that has gone in under a unit replacement program. But to rely totally on individual replacements, and that's what we did once the initial movement of units into Vietnam had passed. At the end of a year, they were rotating people out. They were all individual replacements from there on. I don't care for that.
What type of weapons were the men using by now?
M16s
M16s.
For the soldiers, and most of the officers carried M16s up through, certainly everybody at company level did. At the battalion level, I carried a pistol, but if I was planning on using a weapon, I wouldn't have been running around holding a pistol. I would have been using an M16.
How did you feel about the rules of engagement?
With respect to international borders or?
Borders, and someone we talked to earlier today had been in Vietnam and said if you were going by a village and you were receiving fire, you had to radio back to ask for permission, so on. Did you experience that?
Oh,
How
yes.
did you feel about those things?
Well, it's very difficult. Certainly, it's not just because small arms fire comes out of a village does not mean that everybody in the village is hostile.
Right.
So to blow away the village is a real stretch. On the other hand, you can't stand there and allow your unit to be picked away at and to have casualties taken without taking some action. So it's a very difficult situation. This was particularly apparent to me when we were flying. I did a lot of time in the helicopters, and we would be as a battalion commander, I'd be inserting one or two companies on company operations, and so here you'd see a village, and the company is coming in from one end of the village, and at the other end of the village, very rapidly, here are people in black pajamas on bicycles scooting out the other end of the village. The attitude of the aviators that had been doing this for a long time was generally that was a hostile action. I mean, they would see that as it's probably one of the bad guys. Nobody knew, but that was probably it. Do you engage or don't you? I mean, I saw engagements that I wouldn't have made the call on myself. But on the other hand, if I had been subjected to fire from a situation like that and hadn't taken some action, then I'd feel pretty like I'd made the wrong call. So it's really a tough judgment called. When you're fighting an enemy that is not in a uniform, where you can't positively say that is an enemy soldier. I mean, I know that there were little kids setting booby traps. Well, certainly that doesn't mean you go out and massacre little kids, but it certainly makes you very much aware if a little kid makes a false move, you may take some action against him. That's one of the things about insurgencies and guerrilla warfare and that type of fighting that is unique in our military experience. We didn't face that really in World War II or in Korea. I think Vietnam was the first time that we got into that type of thing. And the rules of engagement, which, as you call them, there isn't always time to get a hold of somebody on a radio who's not where you can see the situation anyway. You're asking somebody else to make a decision on something they can't see. Chances are you're going to make the decision on the ground and then have to answer for it. International borders, we've had that problem for a long time. I mean, at least as far back as Korea. When you're being picked away at from across the border, you have the authority of hot pursuit, like the colony police in a car that darts off into 60 miles an hour into the town of Niskayuna. I mean, they've got some rules that associated with that, and they do it. We were on the Cambodian border. When I commanded the 4th of the 9th Infantry, we were right on the border. And we were trying to interdict supply movements into Vietnam from Cambodia every night. Our battalion was a night fighter battalion. Slept in the daytime, worked at night. And if we had the night vision equipment today that we have today, we could have really done a great job with that. But this was tough, and what the guys, they would come in, and they could stir up a lot of trouble and then take off and go back into Cambodia. So what are you supposed to do? And I believe at that time that our rules, the rules that our battalion were under, was that we did not have the authority to go into Cambodia. Did we? I'm not aware of it. But it wouldn't surprise me to have some young soldier someday come and tell me that, did we go into Cambodia? Sure, we went into Cambodia. I wouldn't be surprised. They don't have any markers down there in the jungle telling you where the line is anyway. But your natural instinct is to pursue.
Now, during was it your second tour that you received a Purple Heart and a Silver Star? Could you tell us about that? Or was that your first?
Second tour. That was second tour. That was with the 2nd and the 27th Infantry. I commanded that battalion for 2.5 months when I was wounded. We'd been given a fast mission to go in, take a company lift in to relieve a special forces team that was working with a Vietnamese unit along a canal called the Bobo Canal, someplace to the west of Saigon. I don't know where it was, really. But we put the company in, and as soon as they were on the ground, they got in a firefight. And the company commander was killed. And the only person, I was in the command and control helicopter, and the only person we could talk to on the ground was his radio operator, who was screaming, that his captain had been killed. And we could see the action going on down there, and I landed in the helicopter, and my brigade commander was already on the ground, a colonel by the name of Maddox, who we referred to as the Gray Ghost. He was an aviator, flew his own command and control helicopter, and was pulling a tour as a brigade commander, infantry brigade commander. Wonderful, wonderful officer. He was on the ground, and as soon as I hit the ground, why, he called me over, and he was able to point out what was going on. And it was a mess. I mean, the company was pinned down. Company commander had been killed. A number of other people had been killed. But he was able to point out to me where one officer was that was still operational, that he could find. And so I took off and got to that officer. His name was Thompson, Steve Thompson. And so together we tried to sort out what the situation there was. There was a lot of fire coming, couldn't tell where it was coming from. We were in an area that was very wet, a lot of bomb craters from B-52s. But it was just total chaos. I mean, nobody knew what was going on. And I guess this is typical of combat, but so you're trying to get control of the situation. And in the meantime, the battalion commander had called on. In the meantime, the battalion commander had called on another company to come in. The company was on the ground, was Delta Company. And so he called another company in from a different direction. They landed, and they started moving forward, and their company commander was killed. So we had two company commanders killed. And I don't know who was still running the show in that company, but I was with Delta Company. And Lieutenant Thompson and I got a few people together, and we were moving a platoon forward. We ended up in this bomb crater, and I got shot in the ankle, and I was just not mobile. I mean, it's one of these things you could move on your elbows, but you couldn't do anything else. So Thompson and I were in the same bomb crater, and we were trying to sort out where the Vietnamese were, so we could try to get this thing under control. We were able to bring in airstrikes. We were able to bring in helicopter gunships. We saw very little in the way of enemy, just because the terrain was such. I mean, the fire was coming at you, but you don't know where it was coming from. You know, we threw a few grenades and so on. Lieutenant Thompson and I found ourselves in the same bomb crater with the soldier that had shot me. And we struggled over Lieutenant Thompson's weapon. I just had a pistol on, which was still on my side. Thompson had an M16, and this Vietnamese soldier, who was uniformed, so was an MVA soldier, was in the crater with Thompson, with me, and we're fighting over Thompson's weapon, and it's slimy. You know, everything is wet in there, and nobody can get a hold of this thing. And suddenly the weapon is going off, and Thompson is taking the bullets, and I got a hold of the weapon, me and the Vietnamese soldier, and I realized that I had shot Thompson. I mean, my hand by then was on the trigger of this weapon, and the Vietnamese has got a hold of the barrel, and he's pulling the thing down. Well, anyway, Thompson takes quite a few bullets in his legs and in his torso. And when I realized what I'd done, I was just, I was mad and I was mortified. And meanwhile, this little Vietnamese is still fighting us, and he's the guy apparently with his AK weapon that had shot me. But I took off my helmet and I started hitting this guy. I mean, because I couldn't stop him from doing what he was doing. Well, I ended up killing him with my helmet. Thompson was just in a terrible shape here in the hole, and we were there together, I guess, for another 2 hours. It started to get towards dark, and Colonel Maddox was back up in his helicopter, and he says, you know, we've got to either get you guys out of there or find some way of defending this thing tonight. And it was clear we didn't have control of the situation there. So they sent in slicks to take us out. And I wasn't mobile at all. They were dragging me across and Thompson, of course, wasn't. I mean, I thought Thompson had been killed. And we get pulled out of there, and we get onto the helicopter and get pulled back to Fire Support Base Jackson. And I didn't see Thompson again for 15 years. 15 years. He spent many months in the hospital. He lost a leg. He had yellow jaundice. He lost a lot of his insides. And but I had his address, and I corresponded with him over the years, every Christmas. He became an attorney, and just before I left the Army, I got notice that he was going to be sworn in as an administrative law judge down in New Jersey. And I went down to the ceremony. That was the first time I'd seen him since this happened in 1969. So it was 14 years, I guess. 24 years. Is that it? 14 years. Yeah. And so he was on one leg and had spent years in the hospital over this. This is kind of a digression, but that was the incident. And I went into the hospital, went back to Japan for the bullet had broken my leg, and I had a lot of muscle I had to pull out of the back of my leg. And so I was evacuated to Japan. I was in the hospital there for about a month. And then got mobile enough, convinced the hospital commander there that I could go back to Vietnam. And so I got back to Vietnam, went back to the 25th Division, and the leg collapsed on me, it blew up, and I was back in the hospital for about 3 weeks. And they sent me up country to First Field Force, Second Field Force for a desk job until I got back in shape. And that was another 2 months. And then I got called back to the 25th Division and given command of another battalion, 4th of the 9th. And didn't have any more scrapes there. The action back at the Bobo Canal, we managed to kill a lot of NVA. They did get I didn't find this out for 30 years, but they did get the Special Forces team out of there. In fact, I went to a unit reunion out in Las Vegas 3 years ago, and that's where I found out that the lieutenant that we'd gone in there to try to pluck he and his team out did get. So the mission got accomplished, although I didn't know it at the time. And we lost a lot of people. you lose 2 company commanders that's a lot of leadership. They're both captains. And then we lost, I think we had probably 9 or 10 other soldiers killed, and 3 times that wounded. It was a bad day for us, but it sure showed me that when you go into an area that the defender has the advantage in an area that he knows, he can see who's coming in. He's got total control of the situation on the ground, and it takes a lot to root people out of bomb craters and spider holes, that sort of thing.
So how did you spend the rest of your career? You were in until '83.
Well, after Vietnam, I was ordered back to the United States to Fort Sill, Oklahoma, which is an artillery post. But they have one infantry battalion there, which provides the infantry support for the post and for all of the artillery training. Artillery don't do anything but support the infantry anyway, and so they needed some infantry there to teach them what it is they're supposed to be supporting. So I commanded that battalion for a year and a half, and then was assigned to the Army War College as a student at Carlisle, Pennsylvania. I was there for a year, and then went to Fort Campbell, Kentucky, where I commanded the 1st Brigade of the 101st Airborne Division. Peacetime duty, and of course the demands are, even though you're preparing always for war, it's always a very different sort of thing. I mean, the things that are important in peacetime command are not the same things usually that are important in wartime command. But that was a great tour, and of course the division at that time was not airborne anymore, it was air assault. So the training there was on operating from helicopters. Was there, commanded that for a year and a half, and then was assigned to Fort Devens, Massachusetts as post commander, and I served there for 4 years. And much of that time was during a downsizing of the Army infrastructure. A lot of base closings going on. There was always a lot of pressure to close places like Fort Devens that were small and did not have large tactical units at. But we were the only military installation in New England. And so keeping Fort Devens open was fiercely defended by people like Senator Ted Kennedy and Representative Dryden, who was a priest, Catholic priest, but he was the representative for the district that we were in. And between the two of them, they did an excellent job of keeping the post open. So I could stay clear of the politics. I mean, I certainly agreed that it was an installation that needed to be there, but I couldn't get involved officially in that. But while I might not have agreed with their politics otherwise, I certainly strongly supported their efforts with keeping the base open. Post commander, you're mayor of a city. I had all kinds of military units there, small units, special forces, military intelligence schools located there, medical units, engineer units. A lot of dependents, a lot of housing, the fire station, the police station. The same headaches that a city manager or a mayor has, but it was a wonderful assignment. And after 4 years, I came here to Albany, New York, where I closed out my active career as a senior Army advisor to the New York Army National Guard. I had a network of advisors around the state. We had typically a lieutenant colonel or a major and a master sergeant with each of the brigade-sized units around the state. So it was a pretty good-sized advisory effort, and I was based here in Albany, down on the state office campus at that time. And so I served as advisor to the chief of staff to the governor. It's what they called the commander of the National Guard at that time. And then I retired in 1983.
How do you think your impressions of your time in service? One minute. Why don't we go to another tape? We're going to go to another tape.
Okay, we're back.
Okay, before I ask the other question, how do you think your military service affected or changed your life? How do you feel about your military service?
Well, it's something I always wanted to do. From the time I was 12 years old, I knew that I wanted a military career. So I didn't go through the throes of trying to decide what I wanted to do when I went to college. I went to that college because I wanted to be an Army officer. And I had grown up, my father was an Army officer then. He'd been a coach for many years, but he graduated from a small college and was in the ROTC, so he was a reserve officer during the 30s, called active duty at the beginning of World War II. So from 1941 on, I was around things military. And I was just attracted to that. So I can't say that it's changed, that the military career changed my life. I can say this, that I never had any second thoughts about that. And I was, from the time I went in until the time I retired, I never at any point considered not being in the service or leaving the service. Because I ended up doing what I wanted to do, and I was happy that I did it. I'm happy today that I did it. I think it provided a wonderful foundation for our children. Sure, they had to move every year or two. They were in a lot of different schools. They all survived. I survived. I think it was a very broadening education for the family. And if I had to do all over again, why, I would do it all over again. So it didn't change anything in my life. I've done a number of things since. I've been in 2 or 3 different career fields since then as avocations, and the things that that I learned in the military about things about self-discipline, initiative, perseverance, things like that were really essential in these other fields. So I believe that you can take your military service and apply it to just about anything very successfully when you leave it.
How did you feel about the anti-war protesters during the Vietnam era?
During the war, I wasn't aware of it. When I was in Vietnam, I was oblivious to it. It just was one of those things that we weren't made aware of. My wife certainly didn't tell me about it. Our kids didn't. And it wasn't until I came back in early 1970 to Syracuse, where there's very little military, that I get exposed to it. And it really surprised me. I mean, I guess I can understand it, although I grew up during World War II, and I was very much a part of and caught up in the patriotism of that time. I was in grade school, and gosh, every week we'd come to school and we'd buy savings stamps, and we'd put them in these little books. You get enough of these little books and they turn into a savings bond. Ration books were sold there in the grade school. That was one of the distribution points. So people were patriotic. People were for the war. And so I was very surprised to come home and find that there was all of this resistance to it. I didn't understand it. And I've seen some of the same thing during the current Iraq situations. It's certainly difficult to be a soldier under circumstances where the civilian base is actively working against what you feel that you're called to do. But I imagine it's even more difficult if you're a conscript, a draftee, somebody didn't choose to do this anyway. I mean, it's one thing for you to be a regular Army guy and doing what you're directed to do, and being somebody that was sent there, and then having the very people that sent you, so to speak, not supporting you. That's going to be very hard.
Now, you entered the Army in '53. Shortly after blacks were integrated into the Army, how did you see the changes with blacks within units from when you first went into Vietnam? Did you see any race problems in Vietnam, or?
Well, the service was integrated before I
Yes, right,
entered.
right.
The very first unit that I was in, most of my NCOs were black. And so throughout my service, I would say a large percentage of particularly the non-commissioned officers in our units were black. Much higher reenlistment rates among blacks than whites. And that was a result of it being a profession that blacks could excel at, were accepted in, were given positions of responsibility in. See, the military was one of the first things to desegregate.
Yes.
Now, what was your question about Vietnam?
Was there a change? Did you see any tension in race relationships in Vietnam at all?
Well, I saw the race relations tensions I observed throughout my career, and I'm not aware of them being any greater in Vietnam than anywhere else.
Okay. Have you ever joined any veterans organizations?
Oh, before I retired, I joined the Retired Officers Association, TROA. I was a member of AUSA, Association of the United States Army. I'm no longer active with that. I found that I couldn't keep up with these things. I mean, when I left the service, I went to work. And my attention then went to what I was now doing. When I was post commander at Fort Devens, one of the major irritants that I had were the guys that had left the service, had gone out and become insurance men, and I'd find them at the officers' club in the afternoon trying to sell insurance to the young lieutenants. And I did everything I could to get these guys barred from the post. I mean, I didn't like the idea of people, once they left the service, using that connection to commercially and to be making their living off.
Right.
And I decided that once I retired, I wasn't going to be one of those guys, and I was not going to have a quasi-military career. And so I pretty purposely didn't cut myself off from, but I didn't actively continue any military connections. And that's pretty easy here in Albany, New York, because there isn't that much military here. But I just when my military career was over, that was over. And
Now, you did say you've attended some reunions?
Well, I've attended one.
One, okay.
One. In 2000, a sergeant that had been in my battalion in Vietnam got a hold of my address and wrote, I didn't even know him. But he put me onto a website and gave me a name, and I found a website for the 27th Infantry, and I made a contact with this guy who'd been a private over there then, and they were getting ready to have a reunion. This company that I'd gone down to help out, this company was having a reunion out in Las Vegas. And so they invited my wife and I to come out and join them for this. And but through a series of emails, it put us in touch with other people from that unit, most of whom I'd never heard of. I mean, I didn't remember the names from anywhere. Thompson was the only name that I remembered from him, and I contacted him and got him to go. So, yeah, we had that reunion. That was great to sit around and tell war stories for a few days. And I've maintained some contact with some of them since then. But you know, I'm not in the military now, and I'm doing other things. And so I just haven't. I know people that make a career of continuing their connection. There's nothing the matter with that.
Yeah.
It just, that's not. I had my career, and I'd like to leave it there.
Okay, all right, well, thank you very much.
Thank you.